I got to tell you, Pete, I have been absolutely pilloried
Oh,
by some of the comments on in the comment section, and
yes,
the
yes,
one
yes,
that I
yes,
get so often, it's almost a daily thing now, is fashion doesn't have any rules.
right.
Don't tell us how to dress. Don't tell us how to. Don't tell us who made these rules, who created these rules. Don't tell us about
Yes,
these rules.
exactly, yes.
Fashion is art. Art is expression. I should be allowed to express myself and do whatever I want to do. And so,
And you can,
and
yes.
you can. So, you know, sometimes I don't know how to respond because obviously there's a long response to it.
Yes, yes.
But I want to hear your own take. You're not the one who answers the comments every day, but you
No, I've
sometimes
had
do.
the comments. I've had the
But
same comments,
I'd
yes.
like to get your take on this.
Okay, well, I have to be very careful what I say because otherwise people will call me a boomer. And maybe even less polite things than
Less
that.
charitable things.
Yeah, less charitable things. So I'm conscious of my age. And the reaction from the crowd out there is going to be, no, you old bugger, stop telling us what to do. But if I may offer a couple of suggestions here. Of course, everybody is at liberty to wear whatever he wants, however he wants. Just as everybody's free to cook what he wants. So if he wants to cook strawberries and avocado mixed with sardines into an omelette, go right ahead. All we're saying is this is one way to do it. It's a way that many people of far greater esteem than ourselves have done it, and we're passing it on. We're not saying it's a law. We're not pointing fingers at people and saying, if you don't do it this way, you're a complete waste of space, go and get a life. Anything like that. All we're saying is, this works. Now, if people take offense at that and say, well, no, don't tell me what to do. Well, we're not telling you what to do. We're simply saying, this is something that you could do because it works for us, and it's worked for, dare I say it, possibly several 100 million other men. So we're not laying down the law. We're simply offering possibility. If you prefer to wear a jacket with 3 arms, or pants with 3 legs, or a shirt with no arms at all, just because you can, well, go right ahead.
Well, Pete, I want to actually dig into something. I want to ask you another question, okay? And I think there is this presumption, rightful or justified or not, that we speak from a high horse, lecturing.
Right.
What else comes to mind? Presumptuous.
Yeah.
And I've heard all sorts of things. and I wonder really, it's like there's something you said, we don't know why you think that, but there's nothing we can do about it. You said that in one of your, so I'd like you to talk about this a little bit. Why do you think that people get this impression, whether it's overtly or covertly communicated, because I'm completely unaware of this.
Now, don't forget that there is a sense in which anybody who says anything with any kind of conviction is tarred with the brush of being a fascist or a supremacist. We could hardly call you a white supremacist, but a supremacist, okay. So the idea is that if you hold a position and speak as if you mean it, you must be a bossy old so-and-so, right? And, of course, this is something that people think. Now, I don't think we do mean to lecture. The reason we say the things that we say is 90% of the time it's because people have asked us about it, and we're actually answering them. Or it's because it's something that we've thought about ourselves and we thought that other people might want to know about it. But there is definitely that tendency of people to think, if you're saying something and you give the impression that you want other people to believe it. Therefore, you're trying to convert them to something. Well, let's admit it. Let's get it right on the table. Yes, we are. We're trying to convert you. But I mean,
But what I don't understand is the vehemence.
oh, well, that's just youthful spirits.
It's almost sort of, it feels like people feel violated almost. I mean, the reaction takes me, often I'm very surprised by the reaction.
Yes, I know what
the
you mean.
The degree of vehemence, they
Yes,
feel
yes,
like as
yes.
though, I'm like, guys, calm down. I mean, this is just a conversation. This is not it's not a political rally.
No,
But
exactly,
the
exactly.
emotions, just quite frankly, sometimes I'm unnerved.
Well, if they get that emotional on Instagram, you wonder what they do in real life. I mean, do they walk around with hatchets, swinging them at people? Because I too, I'm quite surprised sometimes at not only the vehemence against, but also, in some cases, the incredible enthusiasm that people have for the message.
Correct.
So I think it's just it's the way people are. Now, it may also be that people feel in some way or perceive it as a criticism. But, of course, they've got to remember that we, in most cases at any rate, have never met the people that we talk to.
Correct.
So we don't know what they look like.
Correct. Correct.
Now, for all we know, particularly the men that we talk to may be more elegant than we are. Or they may not be. But I have a feeling people take it, yes, as a criticism. Somehow, some kind of criticism of them, which it, by the way, isn't. We're not criticizing anybody. We're simply saying, this is something you can do. We believe it, so we speak about it in a way that we believe.
And Pete, it brings me to another thing. I think a very close second to questioning someone's intelligence is questioning their dress sense.
Yes,
People
yes,
take
yes,
it
yes.
very personally.
Oh, boy, do
and
they
so
ever.
when you express a view which sort of contradicts or is contrary to whatever it is they've been doing or they've known, they feel it's almost as though telling someone you're a dummy.
Right,
In my view,
right.
sort of that's the way a lot of people take
Yes,
the message,
yes,
like
yes,
you're
yes,
telling
yes.
me I'm a dummy,
Yes.
and then sort of these emotions rise
Oh, of
to the
course.
top. So I think if there's one thing I've observed through this journey of being a tailor, proprietor, or sort of call it
Yep.
social media
Yep.
or communicating what we do to the public, it's that when you I don't want to use the word teach for the fear of coming across as lecturing, but when we share our take on these things, people react very violently because they assume some of our positions are an affront,
Right, that's a possibility.
a
Yes.
personal affront.
Yes.
And so there's a complete lack of objectivity.
Of course.
Right? People lose every sense of
course,
objectivity and they take it very personally, emotional.
yes.
And that is something that I wonder how we as humans came to that point where we're so invested in our own, shall I say, narcissism
Vanity, yes.
or vanity
Yes.
that we take offense to something which I would consider an objective
The funny thing
statement or position.
Yes, the funny thing is that the people in their comments are being as harsh as they may perceive that we are being, if you know what I mean. So when you...
Sort of a tit for tat.
Yeah, so when you say, for example, don't buy a clip-on tie, and somebody writes a comment back saying, what do you know? You don't know anything about ties. Ties are stupid anyway, right? It's almost as if they're taking, as I said, that you've insulted them, you've called their mother something unmentionable. And I don't know why it is that people take something they watch on social media that seriously. Now, if it were their friend or their colleague at work, I mean, an actual human, talking to them physically, I can understand that. So if you walked up to somebody and said, oh, you're wearing a clip-on tie, aren't you? Get that thing off you, great. Well, I can understand that, but simply saying, and saying it in a humorous way, means that, well, this explains why, for example, comedians get cancelled.
Uh-huh.
Because comedians say things.
Right.
And somebody says, that offends me.
Yes.
And so suddenly they can't get a gig anywhere. I think it's the same sort of thing. Now, there is a simple solution. And I probably shouldn't say this, but if you really don't like the message, don't watch it. That's all I can say. I'm sorry to have to put it that way, but seriously, that's it. We're simply saying or talking about something that works. Now, very important here, Oki. Fashion is not style. And we are not talking about fashion. Mm-hmm. One look at us should tell you really that we're not talking about fashion, since you cannot possibly describe what the Prof and I wear as fashion in any sense of the word. What we're talking about is a certain way of dressing, a certain approach or design philosophy, you might say, towards your clothes. Now, you may think, well, that's just silly to think about that at all. Fine, it's silly, but that's what we talk about. We're talking about maybe something called dress sense or style, possibly. Now, there was an Englishman years ago, some slightly doubtful reputation, called Quentin Crisp, and Quentin Crisp said that style means being yourself on purpose. In other words, you have to sort of cultivate what you can do. But what we're saying is, this is what you can do. And it will make you look better. It'll make you probably feel better about yourself if you do it. That's not fashion.
Now, talk about this idea of rules. I want you to talk about this idea of, because I get this comment all the time. You know, who made these rules? You know, what are these rules?
Well.
You know, why do I have to adhere to these rules? Why do I have to observe them? So I want you to talk about how rules, or sort of what, what's interpreted as rules are the very foundation, right, of style in a way.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
I mean, there is individual expression, but beneath that, there's a foundation. And I want you to talk about how these set of rules, you know, regardless who or when they were created, are so fundamental to what we understand as style.
Okay, well, you can't...
Do you understand my question?
So you can't have any sort of art if you don't have some accepted conventions. Let's not call them rules, let's call them conventions. Now, let me take music. When you listen to a tune, it goes in a certain direction. If you say, well, I don't care, and I'm not doing it like that, you wouldn't have music anymore in any recognizable way. And you might have something that some very, very sort of sophisticated artsy people would like to listen to, but the average person wouldn't want to listen to it because it wouldn't be music anymore. Now, so within that, though, within that framework, you can have different people who write music, different people who sing music, and they all do it in their own way, but they're all doing the same thing. Now, imagine that there's a convention, and it's that men wear pants. Okay, now this convention's been around an awfully long time, right? And men wear pants, and pants each have a leg, and the two legs are the same length. Okay, well, who made that rule? Well, if you go back to cave paintings, you'll pretty well see that rule. Why is one leg not longer than the other? Because that would look very interesting. You could have a long sock and a short leg here, and a long leg and covering your sock here. Why has nobody done that? Well, it's just that nobody has. Now, why don't men wear skirts? Well, in some parts of the world they do.
Like kilts.
Or grass skirts in Tahiti or Fiji or something, or kilts.
Scottish kilts.
Okay, now, a Scottish kilt is fine in Scotland. But if you wore a kilt, say, a Scottish kilt in Hawaii or walking around, maybe Los Angeles, you could get away with it. In your average town, people would say, oh, that's strange. he's wearing a skirt, why isn't he wearing pants? So there's a certain convention. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do it all the same way. You're wearing rose gold pants, I'm wearing grey pants. Both are pants the same length. You might say, what a boring, stuffy pair you are. Both your pants have exactly the same shape. They both got cuffs. Hidebound, convention-ridden couple of fellas you are. Well, that's just the way it is. If we didn't have those conventions, we couldn't compare anything, and we actually couldn't make anything. Now, admittedly, when you get things made in factories, you have to do it in a standard way. But even before they had factories, people were doing things in a standard way. It's a human nature. But if you don't have conventions, you can't have individual expression, because when everybody's somebody, nobody's anybody. So if, for example, there was no rule, and some pants were short, some pants were long, you could never say, that's a great pair of pants, because there would be no such thing as pants anymore. And that's the best, I mean, off the top of my head, that's the best example I can give. So, now this takes us to a point. Rose gold is not a conventional color, but the cut of the suit is well within the tradition. So what you're doing is you're taking a tradition, a standard, and you're just tweaking it a little bit. All of the finest art is what you call mimesis. It's an imitation.
Improvisation.
So your suit is you might say, an imitation of a classic suit. I don't mean it's not a classic in its own right, but it follows that. Everything in art is mimesis. It's recreating something, maybe making it better. So, for example, painting recreates reality. Some of it is very good, some of it's not very good, some of it doesn't work at all, but it recreates reality. Once you stop doing that with painting, you get into so-called modern art. You really don't have art anymore, because then anything is art. As art dealers will make you buy things that don't look like art at all. So that's why we have these rules. Now, they're not really rules, like the rule of gravity, for example. They're not laws. They're just ways of doing things.
Correct.
And we didn't make them up. We're not forcing people to follow.
Sometimes I just say I made the rules to end the debate. I don't want to talk about this. Just, okay, I made the rules. Accept them or not. You can take them or leave them.
But I'll give you an example. I knew a fellow many years ago who worked in the stock exchange in London. And he said that a man came into the stock exchange wearing a soft collar. And you know what they did to him?
They sent him home.
They debagged him. They tore off his trousers and threw him out the front door, because he was considered the rankest of outsiders for wearing a soft collar onto the stock exchange, because you had to wear a stiff collar. He was debagged and thrown out. So that was when rules were really, because the rules defined where you were in a sort of social order. Now, my mother's father came from the East End of London, a particularly harsh area in the East End of London, which has since been gentrified. I've got a photograph of him at the seaside. And there's my mother, aged about 2, playing in the sand, and he's standing in the water. And what is he wearing? He's wearing a jacket. Yeah, he's wearing a linen suit with a tie, a Panama like what you have, and his trousers rolled up. And I was telling a friend of mine about this, and he said, absolutely right, because that was his way of maintaining his dignity. And wherever he went, he wore a suit. And you used to have men working on construction sites wearing suits. And it was a way of showing that you were substantial enough to afford one, you knew how to wear one, you were elegant. I mean, the harshest critics of men's style were servants, because they knew it was their business to know, because they were the ones that sold you the clothes and cleaned them up for you. But it was a way of establishing a certain social presence. And it was your way of telling people who you were.
Absolutely.
And of course, in a sense, it still is. But it's just that it's not the cut and the style so much. It may be nowadays the fabric. So you can get a $3,000, $2,000 T-shirt that's made of some special material, or it's made by some special guy, probably an Italian, and that tells the world who you are. So in a way, it still has that purpose.
So to bring this all together, or to pull this all together, Pete, fashion versus style. Can you explain to us in a very, very short, concise, if comprehensive statement, the difference between fashion and style?
Certainly. Fashion comes and goes. Style is permanent. In other words, what is stylish today will be stylish tomorrow. Fashion may be different. That's why a well-made, well-designed suit in a good fabric that's made this year, in 40 years' time, will still be considered stylish.
And tell us, in relation or within the context of these rules, or what was the other word you chose, the more...
conventions.
Conventions. Tell us how these conventions relate to both fashion and style.
Well, fashion...
Or not.
Okay.
Relate or not.
Fashion sort of moves around it. So fashion will widen the lapels, narrow the lapels, without really any... Because fashion is marketing, isn't it, really? So without really any consideration of what would actually look better on most people. Fashion gives you soft shoulders, even though most men don't look very good in soft shoulders, because fashion is marketing. Fashion is about how to get you to buy something new because they want to sell you something new. Style is about what looks right. And style always looks right. Even if it's actually not very fashionable, it still looks right.
There you have it. Well, Pete,
good.
I think we'll draw the curtain there. It's been
Yes,
it's been a long and rather interesting. And this could go on for another 2 hours.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Great pleasure.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Bye for now.